Hi there, this is Rebecca Koffler with Censored But Not Silenced. And I have a quick intelligence briefing for you and a threat warning for tomorrow, July 13, 2025. Tomorrow is the first anniversary of the first attempted assassination on President Donald J. Trump that took place at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. What is the best way to prepare for some future attacks? It's to do lessons learned on something that happened prior to that. Fortunately, we have an investigative report that has just dropped today that took a look at everything that happened exactly that day and all of the mishaps that were identified were outlined in this report. And I'm going to go over a few points with you. I'll give you a summary, and I will also place a link to the actual report that you can get some details. So here it goes. As a reminder, exactly how did that occur? We had a 20-year-old Thomas Crooks who was able to breach the security perimeter at Butler location, outdoor location of a rally in Pennsylvania. He was able to pre-position himself atop of a roof of the building with a clear line of sight to President Trump or presidential candidate Donald Trump. Just think about that. Secret Service allowed somebody to actually be atop of a building with a clear line of sight. This man fired 8 rounds out of an AR-15 style rifle, wounding President Trump in his upper right ear. And it is not until he was able to fire those 8 shots that he was killed by a member of the counter-sniper team. So the investigative report found, and this is a bombshell, that U.S. intelligence actually had classified information 10 days prior to the rally in Butler. 10 days. They had that information that there was an active threat on President Trump's life. They conducted a series of classified briefings internally, but they did not share that information with the federal and law enforcement personnel who were responsible for planning, staffing, and securing the Butler event. So agents on President Trump's protective detail were not aware of an active threat to President Trump's life. Imagine that. This is really a bombshell. Next, the agent who was the lead agent for the security for Butler was very junior and inexperienced. She also is known to be an unserious agent, as some of her colleagues reported. She was basically known for taking selfies at security detail events, including in Mar-a-Lago, and was not really doing proper proper job, if you will. So imagine that the Secret Service assigns an unserious junior agent. Maya Soto Perez is the lady's name, to such an important event. Again, the information existed, just like back during the September 11th terrorist attacks, about which U.S. spy agencies had information about that impending threat. So the same way a year ago, U.S. spy agencies had classified intelligence about active threat to President Donald Trump, and yet members of Trump's protective detail, the Pittsburgh field office, were not aware, they were not briefed. Perez herself was excluded from those classified briefings, and yet she was charged to be the lead for the security at Butler. Next, the War Room at Secret Service Washington, D.C. location denied the request from Trump's detail for enhanced counter-drone equipment for Butler. They denied it, despite the fact that tens of thousands of people, of participants, were expected at that event. There was an active threat on the books, and the counter-drone technology enhanced level was denied. And the agent who was responsible for the existing counter-drone operations, not enhanced, but the baseline level, was, and I quote from the report, severely inexperienced. Severely inexperienced. The next failure was the fact that there was no dedicated communication system for the agents to communicate with each other. So they actually relied on their cell phones. Well, the cell phone service was limited at the event, so they couldn't really share information in real time. On top of that, there was no policy, there was no procedure to troubleshoot communication and data malfunctioning. So even if they could potentially find ways to communicate, even with limited service, there was no procedure to troubleshoot whatever malfunctions they had so they could fix them. Moreover, there was no policy and procedure in the federal and law enforcement agency personnel charged with planning, staffing, and securing that event to communicate with Trump's protective detail. Imagine that. So bottom line, there were serious, egregious security failures during that event. And that tragedy was actually preventable. So these are lessons learned. Again, one more point I'd like to raise is here that the report didn't address, and that is why exactly the certain intelligence agencies did not share the information with the federal and law enforcement personnel and the Trump protective detail personnel who were charged with securing the Butler event. Why is that? Was it a simple mistake? Was it deliberate? The American people deserve to know. And again, the best way to prepare for, God forbid, the next event is to actually pay attention to what happened and derive some lessons learned. So it is my hope that the Secret Service has taken under consideration the recommendation from that investigative report, and a year later they've implemented it. I don't have full confidence that they've implemented anything because at this point, but I'm simply hoping. What we do know in addition to that is that the Secret Service, given a lot of issues with the agencies, let's just say it like that, is having trouble recruiting personnel. So they had to drop both physical and educational standards for new recruits. So hopefully they can fix that now that President Trump actually has become president. So going back to threat assessment for tomorrow, we are still in an enhanced threat environment, which the U.S. government called for in the aftermath of U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. So those threat levels have not decreased. So we're still in that particular level. I don't have at this time any specific actionable intelligence information pointing that there's an imminent threat to President Trump. But what we do know is that Iran has an ongoing intifada call on President Trump. So whatever semantics that sometimes U.S. government agencies use to justify not placing additional enhanced security measures, sometimes they say, well, we had an ongoing threat, but it wasn't imminent. Okay, well, it's still, given the seriousness of the matter, given the how patient the Iranians and others are, and how many copycats potentially are out there who would want to emulate Thomas Crooks. And then the other one, the next, President Trump, as you remember, had 2 assassination attempts, right? We're only focusing on this one. So it is an absolute imperative to place enhanced security measures and personnel, experienced personnel. As you may also remember, some of the personnel seemed extremely, who was charged with President Trump's security, was extremely inexperienced at that event. And we saw a female agent who was having trouble reholstering her firearm. Okay, so this is the briefing that I wanted to deliver. Be vigilant, everyone. Obviously, we do not rule out the possibility of additional terrorist incidents. We don't have information about a mass terrorist attacks, but we have indications and warnings about an ongoing pacing threat of terrorist incidents, I would call them, in the aftermath of U.S. strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. This is Rebecca Koffler, was censored but not silenced. This was your daily intelligence briefing for July 13th. If you like my reports, please follow me on X. My handle is @Rebecca0132. I'm also on YouTube, Rumble, Getter, Truth Social, and all sorts of other social media platforms. Thank you for listening, and I'll catch you later.